morning, everybody. I'm very impressed that this room is packed after that great party last night and the karaoke, which I did not participate in because I love karaoke so much. I would have no voice today if I did any yesterday. So this morning, I'm going to talk about my second love after karaoke and I guess folk music, which I shouldn't have told him about. I'm going to talk about CRO metrics for performance and insight. So I think here at this awesome event, you're going to hear a lot about individual tests, and you're going to hear great ways to come up with awesome hypotheses for individual tests and how to analyze them and how to calculate ROI. But what I really want to talk about this morning is moving beyond test-by-test results and really measuring the overall effectiveness of your testing program. So how many of you out there would say you run a pretty sophisticated testing program? Like, who would say okay, yeah, all right. So I think there's a couple things that I know to be true about testing programs. And I think the first thing I know is that most CRO teams focus on and measure the outputs of testing. So, and I think that's because wins make us feel warm and fuzzy inside. So the outputs of testing are always the thing that makes us feel really, really good. That's why I think conversion optimization case studies are incredibly popular. I think people love reading them. I think people love publishing them. And I think it's because the outputs of a successful A/B test makes you look really great to your boss, makes you look really great to your peers, makes you look really great as a speaker, and lets you put these awesome graphs that say you made millions and millions of dollars for your company. I think that's also driven by the fact that all of the, or most of the technology platforms for A/B testing and conversion optimization are also output focused. So they're really tracking the results of individual tests and what that's driving for your business. And I think it's important and I think it's a great thing to focus on. But I think those sophisticated CRO teams or teams that are moving along the maturity curve into a sophisticated program really need to think beyond case studies. And not just because, and Justin's talking a couple slots after me, not just because some of those case studies really are just bad and don't give you applicable insights into how to do testing, but they're also not put in the context of all the other tests that the testing program ran. So when you see a $1 million case study, it looks really, really great. But if I told you that $1 million case study came after 4 years of testing and $5 million of investment, you'd probably be a little less impressed with it. And so what I think is you really need to take into context not just the test-by-test results, but really how does your overall testing program perform, and are you getting better at actually running your program, not just are you getting better at individual tests. And I think the way to do that is focus on the inputs. So we have seen at Experiment Engine tens of thousands of tests through our platform. And I think more than anything, what we've learned by doing data analysis on these tests is the success of a testing program is really driven by the inputs. So it's really driven by how you run your testing program, how you approach testing, how you develop hypotheses, and then the results naturally come out of that. And the people that do the inputs best get the outputs best. So this is my really obvious, you guys are going to think I'm a genius, how to do testing better. 1, increase the number of tests run, so increase your quantity. 2, increase the test 1, which is increase your quality. And then, of course, everybody's number 3 that they go to, which is profit. This is very, very obvious, but what I would say about this is we don't actually, I think as an industry, do an effective, comprehensive job of tracking how well we're doing this. And so I was thinking about things that I do track really, really well. And I am a very slow runner, but I'm trying to get faster. And I think if I tracked the success of my running based on the 1 5K I run every 2 years and how slow I am, I would feel pretty bad about my running program. But instead, what I do is I track every single run I do, every single step I take. Am I taking more steps every day? Am I doing more runs every week? Are those runs getting slightly faster every time I do them? Am I fueling my runs with the right turkey and cheese on whole grain? And by measuring this at the input level, I really do see the outputs, and it also makes me feel better in the process because I can really tweak and measure and modify my running program to reach the outputs I want without having to wait for October for the next, big race that I'm going to do. So this is how I think you do testing better, really, not just kind of quippy, do more and do it better. Set goals. So setting goals for your conversion optimization program really measuring your performance regularly on the inputs to those goals, and then adjusting and iterating. The same way we do on individual pages and individual funnels, I think we need to apply to the operations of our conversion optimization programs. So I really believe this to be true. I believe we need a set of CRO performance metrics to track and improve CRO quantity and quality. I think this is something that a lot of sophisticated teams are doing and are doing in sort of customized way, but I think as an industry, we're not really talking about what are these performance metrics, what are the baselines for the performance metrics, and how do we get better at it? So I'm going to talk about quantity first. So when I talk to teams about their testing programs, this is what I hear a lot. When I ask, what's the quantity of your testing program? I hear this. We run X tests per month. So we run 5 tests per month, we run 1 test per month, we run 50 tests per month. I hear this a lot. I think what people usually mean when they say this in regards to their testing quantity is, we run X tests per month, usually. Like most of the time, we get 4 tests out the door every month. But June doesn't really count, and you shut down for December. And so, and last week was my birthday. I didn't really want to work that hard. And so really, there's not a lot of rigor around tracking test quantity. And I think instead, you should focus on these metrics, which is how many tests can I run? So before you even talk about how many tests you are running, what is the possibility in the world for how many tests you can run? What's your testing capacity? How many tests are you running? So what's your testing velocity and coverage? And then the thing that I think we don't track is, am I getting any better? So am I trending this over time, and am I getting better at it? And when I'm not doing tests, why? If it's your birthday, fine, but at least be honest to yourself and reporting on it. So I'm going to talk through some of these metrics and how we calculate them. So the first is testing capacity. So this is really just understanding what are the possible number of tests that you can run. And this is just a very simple calculation. Really depends on the structure of your site, how many individual funnels you have, how many concurrently testable touch points you have. But really, you take the average duration of a test as required by some statistical calculator, take that over the number of weeks in the year, and then you multiply that by the number of pages or funnels that you can test at one time. So if you have an e-commerce site, a lot of times you can only test 1 at a time because the funnels kind of stack on top of each other, and you don't want cross-test effects. But lead gen, sometimes you have 100 landing pages that can all be individual funnels and be tested at once. So I think really understanding your testing capacity helps you set your primary goal when it comes to testing velocity and quantity. So once you have your testing capacity, you really need to set a goal and then start tracking how well you're going towards that testing capacity. So that's what we call testing velocity. So how many experiments or tests are run per time period? And for very high velocity testing programs, I think you can measure this on a weekly basis. Very, very high testing programs, you can measure this on a daily basis, but you'd probably also need like a drink at the end of the day because that's a lot of data to track. But weekly, I think for high traffic sites and high velocity testing programs is reasonable. And then I think for low traffic sites, monthly is a really great way to to track testing velocity. Even if you're getting 1 out the door every month on average, really looking at that month over month and saying, when am I dropping to 0? When am I really able to do 4? And really figure out what your trends are on your testing velocity are going to let you really understand how well you're performing to your testing coverage goal. And then I think the bonus is doing trend lines on this. So if you want to get real fancy and impress me, doing a tracking of the trend over time towards your goal. So if you look at this chart, in the first, and this is a real testing program that was getting off the ground. If you look at the chart at the beginning, you're actually doing a really good job of month over month. This is a weekly cadence, but month over month increasing your testing velocity. But as you see, our trend of our increase in testing velocity starts to flatten out over December. And so what we need to say to ourselves when looking at a testing program like this is, wow, we were doing really great for 5 months on every month increasing our testing velocity. Why are we flattening out? Why are we not getting better? And in the same way we were getting better earlier in the year. The second thing I think you need to do when you're talking about testing quantity is making sure you're not wasting traffic. So we all know this. Traffic is use it or lose it. We can't just hoard it for the day where we're ready to test and then be like, I'm going to go back to Tuesday's traffic and test them. Not possible. So there's this really great presentation that talks about the importance of speed in testing and coverage in testing. And one of the quotes in it that really spoke to me was, the currency in which you pay for A/B tests is traffic, which we all know to be true. It's the cost we pay for A/B testing. But I think the thing that we need to understand is it's also an asset that we have to deploy in our testing program. And so it's money that we have that goes out the door every second, and it's an asset we have every day that goes out of the door for our testing program if we don't use it. So, you know, I think that one of the things we need to track is, you know, we all know this to be true, but how many of us know how much traffic we're wasting on a regular basis? Like, how many of us truly know I've wasted traffic over the past month? And I think you really need to track that by measuring what's called testing coverage. So looking at all of the testable days in a calendar year, maybe blacklist some days because those days are off limits for testing, the holidays for e-commerce, things like that. But what percentage of testable days do you actually have a test live? And this is a really powerful metric because what it calls out to you is the waste in your testing program. And you can really look at your program and say, what is the waste of traffic I will tolerate in my testing program? Maybe it's, I'll accept 10% of 10% of days we don't test, or I will accept 50% of days we won't test. But at least you know and can measure the impact of untested days on your overall ability to reach that testing capacity. So I think you can track it two ways. I think this visual of just like a red calendar where you're saying like, oh, after the 4th of July, we really didn't do any testing because we were all, you know, coming off long weekends and we didn't get a lot of stuff done that week. So we should probably prepare for holidays so our testing coverage is higher after holidays. Or you can measure it on a percentage basis, and you can measure this month over time. I think a really powerful way to measure testing coverage is doing something like this. So this is a really great way to get teams excited about keeping testing coverage up, which is tracking the time since your last 0 test day. So how many days in a row, what's your streak of days since you've had since you've had 0 tests live? And I think once you hit like 100 days, it's very, very exciting. You should celebrate as a team. Once you've hit a year, it's even more exciting. And when you go back to 0, it's a real bummer. So I don't know if any of you are gamers or are like really prone to gamification of applications. I clearly am, especially in the fitness space. This sort of stuff works on me. And what it does is it really forces you to stay disciplined about your testing program and really face the reality of that wasted traffic. So those are a couple ways that you can measure testing quantity, but of course, if I got thousands of just really crappy tests out the door that didn't do anything for my business, that wouldn't be good either. So of course, you need to track quality as well. And what I want to keep telling people, and what I really want to happen, is for teams to stop evaluating the quality of their program on a test-by-test basis. So I think you guys would agree with me. If you were all measured by the success of the last test you ran, how many of you would feel like really, if that was the only thing you were measured on? I don't know if all of us would feel very good. Probably like 75–80% of us have had an inconclusive test the last test we ran. We probably wouldn't feel that good. We didn't learn that much. We spent a lot of time, and we learned nothing, and it just wasn't good. So I think evaluating the quality of your program on a test-by-test basis, which is what our bosses tend to do, it makes you look good until it makes you look bad. If you go through a streak of losing tests, unless you have some metric at a higher level, some goal at a higher level that you're tracking to, the test-by-test stuff can be really emotionally volatile and hard, and can cause you to lose momentum in an internal testing program. So I think these are the things we really need to think about. Not just what is the success of any individual test, but am I running effective tests? So are my tests as a whole, as a program, effective? So what's my win rate? What's my average lift amount? What's the expected value of the test that I'm going to run? Am I running tests effectively? So am I putting the right amount of resources, the correct type of resources? Am I spending the right amount of time on tests so my ROI is positive? And then I think this is the thing that is so important, is even if you're tracking these things, if you don't trend them over time and you're not getting better at increasing your quality, improving your quality, there's probably something there, and so, or you're getting worse. So trending these all over time and really understanding how is the aggregate performance of my program, how's the aggregate quality of my program trending over time? Are there things that I can do to make it better? Are there things that I'm doing that's making it worse? So talking about quality, one of the very common quality metrics that you see is win rate. So what percentage of tests win, lose, or are inconclusive? Most of the teams that I know that track win rate, and I don't know that a lot of them really do on a regular basis, track them very similar to this. Pauline is going to talk in a couple minutes or in like an hour. And at Hotwire, they actually don't track win rate, but they track learn rate. So they take the percentage of tests that are winners or losers, because you can actually draw insights from those. And they say, we just want an outcome. You know, the outcome can be positive or negative, but we want an outcome we can draw something from. The inconclusive is kind of the muddy gray area that none of us like. But I think even then, you know, what is the percentage of my tests that are effective for me? And I think once you get to this number, you can start to baseline yourself against industry averages, vertical averages, competitors in your space. There are a lot of people at a high level that talk about their win rate percentages. So I think Netflix is at 10%. That's a number you hear a lot. Experiment Engine is analyzing all of our data to come up with win rates by industry, which are actually pretty consistent and interesting across different companies. So you really start to baseline yourself and saying, am I being as effective as my competitors or my peers in the quality of my testing program? And then this is going to be me saying this every minute, but then trending that over time. So what is my rolling win rate? So what percentage of tests win, lose, or inconclusive over time? And I think the most effective way to measure this is doing something like a rolling 3-month average. So looking at the last, you know, because if in 1 month you only want to run test, a rolling win rate of 1 month or a month-over-month win rate of 1 month isn't great. And if you do it over all time, it starts to flatten out and hide issues in your data. And so I think a rolling the last 3 months win rate really tells you, are you keeping and you outputting a consistent quality of tests? Can you predict with a reasonable margin of error how many of those tests are going to win? And therefore, can you predict how much your testing program is going to be worth for you in the future? And I think once you hit a steady testing velocity, we see this happen around 20, 30 tests typically. Ideally, your win rate will stay level or increase. And so we don't see a lot of teams who dramatically increase their testing velocity who see their win rate tank, because those teams that are ready to increase their testing velocity are sophisticated. They're running those tests with very, very high quality. And so even though the quantity is increasing, the quality as measured by win rate is staying consistent. And then I think you get bonus points for me if you measure this by page or funnel. So if you measure your win rates by individual pages, you see some variance there. But then you can start to really, really predict the effectiveness of any given test, which is what I'm going to roll this all up into and talk about economics, which will be fun. Nothing like economics at 10 in the morning. So talking about expected value. So there's this concept of expected value, which is the value of some event with a probability. And so this is a really good common example of how to think about expected value. So say we go out tonight, we get drunk at Conversion XL, and I challenge you to a game of dice. And I say, hey, you have to pay me $1 for every roll of the die, but if you roll a 3, I'm going to give you $5. And so, you know, if you're had a couple beers, maybe it's hard to make them. Maybe you think you're going to pull one over on me, and you're really good at running 3s. But you can actually calculate what the expected value is of the roll of the dice. And so it's done very simply. The win rate of a dice is, 1/6. So it's 16%. The value of the win is $5. I'm going to give you $5. So the expected value of the roll is actually 83 cents. It's that 16% times the $5. So don't play this game. I'm very, very good. I will take all your money. But I think that you can apply this very same thing. I mean, wins have a probability-based outcome, or tests have a probability-based outcome. And I think if you track your testing program over time, you can actually, with some reasonable margin of error, predict what that probability is. So you should be able to tell what the expected value is of any test that you run. And that's calculated something like this. It can get very, very complicated if you want to get complicated. But essentially, it's your average win rate of all the tests, your average lift of a winning test, and then the revenue value of that test. And so I can apply this to a specific example that's not DICE. But so let's say it costs you $1,500 in tools and resources and time to run a test. And every time you win, you can reasonably predict that you're going to get a 10% increase, because that's your average lift amount on your revenue, which is $1 million. And your win rate over 100 tests has been 10%. And you're like pretty sure, pretty confident that's going to continue to be 10%, because that's what you've seen trend over time. So you can do a calculation similar to this, which is my win rate is 10%. The value of the win is 10% times $1 million, which is $100,000. So the expected value of the test, win, lose, or inconclusive, is $10,000 over time. So if you had an infinite amount of tests, or at least a reasonably large amount of test chances that you think you can run, each test should net you on average about $10,000. Now, it doesn't mean that test is going to give you $10,000, but over 10 tests, you're probably going to make $100,000, and so those individual tests that lead up to that win are worth about $10,000. So you definitely want to run this test. And I think once you know the expected value of your testing program, you can start to make really strategic decisions about what type of testing program that you want to run. And so I think there's a lot of debate and a lot of feelings around what types of tests do well, what types of wins you should shoot for, what type of investment you should make in individual tests. And I think by tracking your actual performance on an actual testing program, you can really start to draw the outlines of the type of program that's going to work most effectively for you. And I think that's by calculating the annual expected value of a program. So taking all this information, taking the expected value of your test, the win rate, the average lift amount, the revenue value, and then multiplying it by that very first number that we talked about, which is your annual testing capacity. So how many tests you can run. And that will really get you an annual expected value of your program, which you can actually track your progress to. So you can say, that's my goal. My goal is to make $1 million. And in April, I'm $200,000 there. And so you can start to decide, based on your data, what type of testing program you want to run. So if you see high complexity tests have a 30% or 20% win rate and a 30% average lift, and low complexity tests that you run have a 10% lift and a 10% win rate, you can start to see, well, if I ran only high complexity tests, this is roughly what my annual expected value of this program would look like. Or if I run only low complexity tests, this is what it would look like. And then you can start to make strategic decisions, right? Do I have the capacity to run 100 tests? Am I comfortable with the risk of a 25 tests per year program? Is it worth that additional $500,000 to me? So you can start to make really, really good data-driven decisions based on your own data about your own testing program on what type of program will work for you in the future. And then, I'm a broken record, but yes, you should trend this over time. So you can actually track expected value and annual expected value year over year, month over month. And you can start to see trends and see where you're getting optimizations or where you're maybe starting to go a little lax on your program and seeing trends fall down. And then, of course, set goals. So put it all together, very, very easy, very simple CRO metrics for performance. So I encourage you all to track quantity by measuring the velocity and coverage of your testing program, no matter how small it is. And the goal for coverage, ideally is 100%. The goal for your velocity is based on that testing capacity calculation that you do. The next thing you need to do is track quality by win rate or learn rate, average lift and expected value, and then always set goals and measure all of this over time. So always be looking and reevaluating the operational performance of your conversion optimization program and really see at a program level where you can make improvements. And I promise you, if you track and measure and get better and better at quantity and quality, with all the amazing knowledge that you're getting from the experts here and everything that's available online for you to learn how to run really, really awesome tests, you will get those amazing outputs, and then you can publish an awesome case study that will make everybody feel good. So, and then this can all actually be done in spreadsheets. So we're going to share after the event a Google Sheet where it's kind of like a standard tracking sheet which will calculate some of these graphs and do some of these things for you so you don't have to build it yourself. And I'm ready for questions.
All right.